The most important thing any company or any brand can have is an identity. That's absolutely what it is, whether it's a good identity, a bad identity, whatever. It's about that whole thing of making a good impression or making a bad impression, but the worst thing of all you can make is no impression at all. It's better to be known for something, whatever that something is, than absolutely nothing at all. And it's what they got to talk about with the WWE in recent years. I feel that they've struggled to establish a new brand, a new identity when they changed their name from WWF to WWE. Because the fact of the matter remains, 12 years after that name change, if you talk about professional wrestling with people that don't watch the product now, they will more often than not probably still refer to WWE as WWF or the World Wrestling Federation. That's not good. That means people are associating that product with that name from that time frame. And the WWE hasn't done a good enough job of getting out their new name and their new brand and establishing a new identity going forward. And I don't care what anybody says, and no matter how they spin it, that's not good for business. That's not good for the product, and that's not good for your brand. That's a bad thing. And TNA, I feel like, has always struggled in its 12 years of existence to establish a brand, to establish an identity, to have something that people actually know it for, especially the masses, if you will. But there was one thing that they had that maybe helped them stand alone and stand a little different here in the US in terms of a wrestling company. There was one thing that gave them a little glimmer of an identity, a little glimmer of a brand establishment, if you will, and that was the six-sided ring. Some people liked it, some people thought it was stupid, but it was something different. It was something unique to the TNA brand, and as a result, it became one of the major things by wrestling fans that TNA was known for, good, bad, or otherwise. See, at least creating an impression with pretty much everybody that had come across the product in one way, shape, or form. So, of course, TNA, in all of its infinite wisdom, when they brought in Bischoff and Hogan to turn TNA into a weak ass, cheap ass WWE reject, cheap feeling type of product, one of the first things they did was to take away that brand identity that had been established over the previous almost 8 years by eliminating this six-sided ring with a quickness because they didn't like it, because they didn't get it, because they didn't understand it, and they didn't have any appreciation or respect for the identity that TNA had assembled and built and cultivated in large part around the identity that came with that six-sided ring. And I think that has led to some disastrous results for the company as a whole. Now, look, TNA's problems are much bigger and much deeper than any one thing. Those problems and those mistakes encompass a wide varying type of things from a business perspective, from a creative perspective, from a wrestling business perspective. The mistakes are numerous. But one of those seminal things you could look at and say, this is when things really started to nosedive. These are when things really started to take a downward turn. Was when TNA got away from its identity, when TNA went in a different direction by, yes, getting rid of the six sided ring. It's been a little over 4 years now since that initial decision, and the results, you can't argue, have been any good. They have been disasters. So apparently, TNA has started up a poll on their Facebook page asking the fans if they like the traditional four sided ring or if they'd rather have the return of the six sided ring. I guess here's my question. Number one, TNA, you know damn good and well by asking that question, you would think you know what the answer is going to be. So why even bother asking it? Unless you are really that truly out of touch, where you actually believe people that watch TNA's product are going to presume to prefer a four-sided ring over the six-sided ring that they grew up on your product watching for almost 8 years. If you really thought there was any question or any doubt, maybe that shows just how clueless TNA's management is and just how hopeless that company's plight is right now. But you're asking a question that you damn well good and know the answer to. What makes that even worse is if you're not going to take the results of that and you're going to affect some positive change, then why even bother teasing people? Why even bother setting up the play? Why even bother teeing that ball up and even presenting that as an option? Furthermore, why wait 4 fucking years to correct a previous mistake. Why wait so long? Now you have gotten to the point of basically being in the point of no return where even bringing it back is going to do you absolutely no good, because any semblance of a brand or any semblance of an identity associated with that six-sided ring and the people associated with, with that six-sided ring are long since gone from the picture. The AJ Styles, the Kazes, the Daniels, the Chris Sabins, the Alex Shellys of the world, they're all gone. So these guys that you brought in, over the years that became a part of that TNA brand, they were a part of the company's identity from an in-ring standpoint. People knew the type of matches they were going to get. They were going to get more extreme matches. They were going to get more physical matches. And that, again, went kind of hand in hand with that six-sided ring. But now in 2014, you're going to try and even entertain the thought of bringing back the six-sided ring without having the people in place that were there that helped the six-sided ring work to begin with. If anything, to me, that just shows more of TNA's stupidity and just how out of touch they are and just how clueless they truly are. Look, I'd love to see the six-sided ring back at TNA, in theory, because if nothing else, it would be an admittal by TNA that they once goofed, they once fucked up, and they understand that that was the one true thing that they ever had that really, above all else, with any American wrestling company on television, it was the one thing that was unique. It was one thing that was different. That one thing that made them stand apart, good, bad, or otherwise. At least they would understand the importance of doing that and not trying to be a cheap knockoff imitation of the WWE. I'd be all for that. But at this point in time, if you are not going to establish the brand and identity to go along with that six-sided ring, if you're not going to have those people there that could make that six-sided ring work for the audience, and if you're not going to affect other real necessary positive changes to try and actually, for once and for all, give TNA a real damn identity as a company, any type of positive identity of a company in 2014 other than the colossal failure that it seems to want to be known as, then what's the point? And why bother? That's my whole thing about this. If you're going to sit there and bring it back for one night at like Destination X, you're just teasing people. You're reminding people of what it used to be, and they're yearning for those days, and that's not always necessarily a good thing. If anything, that does more to diminish the current product and make people not enjoy the current product as much. And believe me, when it comes to TNA right now, there are a lot of reasons not to enjoy the current product. You really, really, really have to be a TNA loyalist, or to me, in my opinion, have really, really, really low standards to really think TNA is a good wrestling product at this point in time. We've seen times where TNA has been a really good wrestling company, even if it didn't always get the publicity that it should have, and even if it didn't get always the positive reviews and the positive press that it should have. It's always had that redheaded stepchild type of treatment from the pro WWE wrestling media, if there is such a thing. But by God, look at this company in 2014. You could just go through a whole laundry list of the screw-ups of this company and what they consistently get wrong, and what they seem to think is just fine is anything but. So yes, in theory, again, the bringing back of the six-sided ring sounds like a wonderful and tremendous idea. Except, a couple of years ago when they rebranded themselves Impact Wrestling and they were doing a big deal about that, that did nothing ultimately to establish a brand, to establish an identity whatsoever. So what makes us think that bringing back the six-sided ring is going to accomplish that? What makes us think that if they did bring back the six-sided ring, they would give you the type of action, the type of in-ring style, the type of wrestling company that you would come to expect, and associate with that six-sided ring? And what makes you think that TNA would even get this right? I have no reason to believe that TNA would get this right. So as far as the six-sided ring goes, it sounds great in theory, but at this point, until TNA does the things necessary to affect some real positive changes, why bother? Just seems like another pathetic attempt to try and go for something short-term as a fix instead of dealing with some of the longer-seated, deep-rooted, big problems that this company has. That's just the way I look at it.